3:11 a.m., the Rosewood Motel, Nevada. Ethan Carter's world had been a blur of asphalt and truck stops since the accident. It had been weeks, but the concussion still left him with a dull throb behind his eyes, a phantom ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. Since that night, the nightmares had been a relentless torment. Not the kind that faded with dawn, but the kind that bled into waking life, leaving a cold dread that clung to him like a second skin. He'd been forced to pull over at the Rosewood Motel, a relic that looked as if it had been abandoned for decades. It sat alone on the desolate stretch of Nevada highway, its neon sign flickering erratically, illuminating nothing but cracked plaster and the vacant stares of broken windows. Local legends whispered of the eyes of the sleepers visible in the dead of night, two burning dots that watched from the dark. Ethan, a man who scoffed at ghost stories, didn't have a choice. His rig was dead. The receptionist was an old woman with a smile so wide it looked painted on. Her eyes, however, were still, unblinking pools of black. When she handed him the key, her fingers were as cold as death. "You'll find your room," she said, her voice a dry whisper, "right where you need to be." Room 17. The air inside was thick and stale, smelling of dust and something else, something metallic like old blood. He glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 3:11 a.m. He tossed the key onto the dresser and lay down, the exhaustion of the road finally claiming him. Then, the nightmare began. He awoke, or so he thought. He was in the same room, the same bed. But he couldn't move. His muscles were stiff, heavy as if someone had poured concrete into his limbs. A low, raspy sound filled the room. A breath. Not his own. It was a slow, heavy inhalation, like air being sucked through a straw. The sound was faint at first, coming from the corner of the room, but with each passing second it grew louder, colder. The air around him dropped several degrees, and he could feel the moisture on his skin turning to goosebumps. A wave of panic washed over him. He thrashed against the invisible weight holding him down, but his body wouldn't obey. He tried to scream, but the air caught in his throat, and the only sound he could make was a muffled gasp. He blinked, and the room shifted. The dust motes in the air were gone. The bedsheets were crisp and white. He was standing now, standing in the same room. He felt a surge of relief. He was awake. The dream was over. He walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face to wash away the last vestiges of fear. He looked in the mirror, but his reflection wasn't there. Instead, two black empty sockets stared back at him from the glass. The heavy, cold breath was right behind him now. He could feel it on the back of his neck, a frigid whisper that promised an eternity of terror. The smell of old blood was stronger now. He slammed his eyes shut, wishing he could just wake up. He opened his eyes again. He was back in bed, the same room, but now the window was boarded up. A single small detail was different. The clock on the nightstand still read 3:11 a.m., but the minute hand was moving backward, ticking one excruciating second at a time. The sound of the breath was closer now, a rhythmic inhale and exhale that was no longer faint but was right at his bedside. He was trapped in a loop, a waking nightmare, and with each new layer of the dream, the unseen entity was getting closer. He could feel its presence, a suffocating dread that promised to consume him entirely. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that this was not a dream. This was real, and he was not alone. 3:11 a.m. The time was a lie. Ethan's mind raced, a frantic hamster on a wheel that was spinning faster and faster. He had been through this loop countless times. The bed, the movement, the fleeting sense of hope, and then the inevitable return to the waking nightmare. The tiny distortions were the only things that changed. The clock hand moving backward, the boarded-up window, the faint smell of dust giving way to the cold, metallic scent of blood. The room itself was a labyrinth of repetition, each new layer a subtly different version of the last, designed to break his mind and his will. This time, when he opened his eyes, The room was eerily silent. Not just quiet, truly silent. The distant hum of the AC unit, the gentle buzz of the faulty neon sign, the rhythmic tick of the clock, all of it was gone. The stillness was heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the rasping, cold breath right next to his ear. The breath was closer than it had ever been. He felt a sudden sharp cold on his cheek. It wasn't the chill of the air, but something else, something solid. He realized with a gasp that it was a finger, tracing a line from his temple down to his jaw. He could feel its cold, dry texture like a piece of brittle wood. Yet when he squeezed his eyes shut and then opened them again, there was nothing to be seen. The room was empty. The sound of the breath was gone. A new noise replaced it. A soft, whispering voice, so close it felt as though it was coming from inside his own head. "You're almost there," it hissed, a cruel, mocking sound. Almost awake. Panic was a bitter taste in his mouth. He knew this was the trap. The whispering was meant to make him believe he was gaining control, that he was about to break free. But he knew, in his gut, that this isn't an escape. It was just a deeper layer of the dream, a cruel twist meant to give him hope before it was brutally snatched away. He threw himself out of the bed, determined to find a way out, to escape the sound and the cold that was now a constant, oppressive weight on his body. He ran to the door and pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't turn. The lock was solid, unmoving. He pounded on the door, his fists raw and bruised, but no one heard him. There was only the whispering voice, now from all around the room, echoing his thoughts, mimicking his panic. He turned from the door, his eyes wide with fear, and saw a figure in the corner of the room. It was the old woman from the reception desk. Her painted smile was wider than ever, stretching from ear to ear. Her unblinking eyes were fixed on him, two black holes in the dim light. She wasn't standing. She was simply there, hovering inches above the floor. "He's been waiting for you," she said, her voice a hollow, rustling sound like dry leaves skittering across the floor. "The ones who are nearly awake are the sweetest prey." The heavy, cold breath was back, not just in one place, but everywhere surrounding him. He could feel it pressing in on him from all sides. The whispering voice began to repeat the same phrase over and over, faster and faster, a maddening mantra. "You are almost there. You are almost there. You are almost there." He felt the cold, dry touch again, this time on his shoulder. It lingered, a cold hand resting on him. He knew what was next, the final twist, the moment of false awakening. But he wasn't ready to give up. He had to fight it, to break the loop, even if it was just for one more second. He had to be smarter than the dream. He had to face the breath. 11 a.m. The time was a countdown. The cold hand on Ethan's shoulder felt impossibly real. He flinched away, stumbling backward until his spine hit the cold, hard wall. The receptionist, her eyes empty, her smile a grotesque parody of joy, floated toward him. Her feet didn't touch the ground. She wasn't human. She was a puppet, a herald for the real horror. And now she was right in front of him. "It's time," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle. The sound was everywhere now, as if the walls themselves were speaking. "He's tired of waiting." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He had to be smarter. He had to think beyond the fear. The awakening was the final twist, the moment he would be tricked into believing he was free, only to be trapped forever. He had to break the cycle before that final, fatal second. He remembered the words he'd been hearing, the maddening mantra that echoed in his head. "You are almost there. You are almost there." He realized they weren't just a taunt. They were a cue, the trigger for the next stage of the nightmare. If he could stop himself from believing in the escape, he could stop the loop. With a defiant roar, he lunged not at the receptionist, but at the clock on the nightstand, the clock that was a lie. He grabbed it and smashed it against the wall, splintering the cheap plastic and glass. The minute hand, still moving backward, snapped off and fell to the floor. As the clock shattered, the room twisted. The walls seemed to melt, the furniture dissolving into a swirling vortex of shadow and dust. The receptionist's smile cracked, and she dissolved into a wisp of smoke, her laughter a final, chilling sound that faded into the void. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no cold, no fear. Just a deafening silence and the feeling of weightlessness. Ethan knew this was it. This was the moment of almost there, the final, dangerous second before the true awakening, or eternal entrapment. He shut his eyes tight, holding on to the memory of his truck, of the open road, of the sun on his face. He refused to be fooled. He would not open his eyes until he felt the genuine warmth, the real, undeniable feeling of being awake. He felt a soft bump, a gentle rocking. He smelled diesel and old coffee. The sound of a radio crackled to life, a country music station playing a tune he knew. It was so real, so perfect. He was tempted to open his eyes. He felt the worn fabric of his seat and the steering wheel beneath his hands. But then, he felt a cold, dry hand on his shoulder. He knew this touch. It was the breath. It was still here. He refused to open his eyes. He squeezed them tighter, holding on to the reality he had created in his mind. He heard a rustling from the seat beside him, a soft, hollow chuckle. Then a dry, whispering voice said, "Look at me, Ethan. Look at what you've done. You've almost escaped." He didn't listen. He fought against the urge, his body trembling. The voice grew louder, more frantic. "Open your eyes, just for a second. Look at your truck. Look at the road. It's real. You're free." He didn't open them. He held on to the conviction that the reality he was experiencing was a fabrication. He knew the receptionist and the breath were part of the same entity, and she was in his truck with him. If he opened his eyes, he would see her smile, see her unblinking eyes, and be trapped forever in the final second. The cold hand on his shoulder tightened, its grip like iron. The air filled with the deafening, freezing sound of the breath, and the whispering voice turned into a frustrated, guttural growl. "You fool! You are so close!" But then it stopped. The cold faded. The voice disappeared. There was nothing. Just silence. He slowly, cautiously, opened his eyes. He was in his truck. The radio was playing. The sun was rising over the distant mountains. He looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. He was alone. He let out a shaky breath, a real one, and started the engine. He put the truck in gear and slowly pulled back onto the highway, leaving the ghostly Rosewood Motel behind. He knew what he had done. He had refused the final awakening, the final, fatal trick. He had chosen to remain asleep for one more second, one more moment, to break free. He drove on, and as he drove, he saw a flash in his rearview mirror, not of the motel, but of a face. The receptionist's smile. It was there for a split second, then gone. He knew she wasn't in his truck, but he also knew something else. He could still feel the cold on his shoulder. He could still hear the ghost of a whisper in his ear. And as he looked at the clock on his dashboard, it read 3:11 a.m. The city was a graveyard of memories, and I was its lone gravedigger, driving a steel coffin with a yellow sign on top. My name is Jack, but no one calls me that anymore. Not since the case. Not since Sarah. I used to be a cop, a good one, or so I thought. But that night, in the chill of November 2005, everything changed. I left the force, bought a taxi, and traded a badge for a meter. Now I drive through the lonely, echoing streets of Brooklyn, a ghost in a machine, haunted by a past that refuses to stay buried. The dream started a few weeks ago, always the same. I'm in my cab, but the streets are wrong. The storefronts are warped, the buildings hunched and broken, like something out of a funhouse mirror. There's no one around. The silence is the first thing that gets to you, a dead, suffocating blanket of quiet that makes your ears ache. And then, At exactly 3:07 a.m., it happens. All the streetlights, every single one, just wink out. 7 minutes of total, absolute darkness. That's when they appear. The figures. They stand on the pavement, their faces blank, their bodies unnaturally still. They don't move, they don't speak, they just stand there. But their eyes, God, their eyes. They're empty black voids that stare right through the windshield and into my soul. They're looking for something, and I have this terrifying feeling that it's me. Every time I wake up, the feeling lingers. The cold sweat, the racing heart, and the phantom ache behind my eyes. I can't shake it. But the worst part, the part that makes my blood run cold and my hands tremble on the steering wheel, is what happens next. The moment I open my eyes, a single glance at the digital clock on my dashboard confirms my worst fear. It's always 3:07 a.m. I'm no longer just dreaming. I'm trapped in a loop. The unseen journey isn't something I experience only in my sleep. It follows me into the waking world. Tonight is no different. The cab hums, a low, metallic growl against the stillness of the Brooklyn night. The radio crackles with static, a faint, almost non-existent hum. My eyes flick to the rearview mirror. Empty. I've been driving for hours, my mind a foggy mess of exhaustion and paranoia. The city is quiet, the late-night traffic a mere trickle. This is my time, the hour when the living go to sleep and the ghosts come out to play. The clock on the dash blinks, each second a hammer blow against my sanity. 3:06 a.m. 1 minute to go. My knuckles are white as I grip the steering wheel. I could pull over, stop the car, but I know it's pointless. The dream always finds me. It's a part of me now. It's an infection. I close my eyes for a second, a foolish, desperate attempt to hold back the tide. I open them, and the world outside the cab is different. The familiar streets of Brooklyn have melted away, replaced by that haunted, desolate landscape from my nightmares. The buildings are skeletons of their former selves, and the silence is so profound it's deafening. My heart pounds against my ribs. It's happening again. My foot instinctively hits the gas, but the car feels heavy, sluggish, as if it's struggling against an unseen force. Then, just as the digital clock flashes to 3:07, a figure appears in my rearview mirror. A passenger. The midnight passenger. I hadn't heard the back door open, hadn't seen anyone get in. He's just there. A dark, indistinct shape in the back seat. I can't make out his features, not even his clothes. It's like looking at a smudge of ink against a black canvas. My eyes dart to the mirror again, and for a split second I see it move. A twitch of the head. But when I snap my head around to look, the back seat is empty. Nothing. Just the faint smell of wet earth and old secrets. The radio crackles to life. The static clears and a voice, a low, raspy whisper, fills the cab. "Take me to 1403 Darkwood Lane." I freeze. Darkwood Lane. The name sends a jolt of icy dread through me. I know that name. It's the location of the Sarah case, a derelict house in the middle of nowhere, where a young woman vanished without a trace, and where I, as a rookie cop, failed to find her. My hands are shaking uncontrollably now. How did the radio know? I hadn't entered any address, hadn't even turned it on. I try to speak, to yell, but my throat is a knot of fear. The voice returns, closer now, a chilling echo in the silent cab. "Drive, Jack. The meter is running." And in that moment, as the streetlights flicker and die and the silent figures begin to materialize on the pavement outside, I realize with a cold, sickening certainty that I'm not the one driving this taxi anymore. I'm just a passenger in my own nightmare, and the driver is something far more sinister. I can't look away from the road ahead, because in the rearview mirror, that dark shape in the back seat is beginning to take form, and I have a feeling that when it finally reveals its face, it's the last thing I'll ever see. I swallowed the knot of terror in my throat and forced my eyes back to the road, my hands so tight on the steering wheel my knuckles ached. 1403, Darkwood Lane. The voice from the radio was a dry whisper of rustling leaves and forgotten whispers. It was the same voice I'd heard in my dreams, the voice that spoke of places where people disappeared. My mind raced back to Sarah, to the house I'd searched a decade ago, finding nothing but cold stone and dust. Was this the dream's way of dragging me back to my greatest failure? Faster, Jack. The voice was a ghost on the back of my neck. I couldn't look in the rearview mirror, not anymore. The last glimpse of that indistinct shape was enough. I knew it wasn't a person. It was a smudge of everything I was running from. The streets outside my windshield were no longer those of Brooklyn. The familiar brownstones and neon signs had been replaced by gnarled, skeletal trees that reached for the sky like skeletal hands. The asphalt was cracked and broken, with thin, gray mist snaking across its surface. The silence was so complete, it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. Every light was gone. The world outside was just a field of deep, endless shadow. My radio hissed to life again. The voice was clearer now, closer. Turn left at the next crossroads. I didn't need to look at the radio. I could feel the words in the air around me. They were a part of the cab now, a part of me. I slammed the brake pedal, the cab's tires screaming on the non-existent road. A crossroads lay ahead, but it wasn't a normal intersection. It was a convergence of crumbling paths, each one shrouded in a fog so thick it was like a wall. And on each path, standing motionless in the swirling mist, were those same blank-faced figures from my dreams. They were everywhere, hundreds of them. Their black, empty eyes were fixed on my car. They were waiting. For me. Go on, Jack, don't stop. The voice was a harsh command now, like a drill sergeant from a nightmare. They're just looking for a ride. I didn't believe it. Their silence was a threat. Their stillness was a promise of something terrible. I gripped the wheel, my foot hovering over the accelerator, paralyzed. That's when I saw it in the rearview mirror. A flash of movement, a faint reflection. It was a face, not the passenger's but mine. But it was wrong. My eyes were wide and filled with a terror that wasn't my own, and my mouth was a rictus of silent screams. My reflection wasn't looking at me, it was staring at the passenger behind me, its face a mask of pure, unadulterated fear. I snapped my head back, looking for the passenger. The seat was empty. No one there. My breath hitched. But the reflection... I looked back at the mirror, but it was gone. Only my normal, terrified face stared back. Turn left, Jack, the voice repeated, a thread of something cruel and amused woven into the whisper. With a jolt of raw adrenaline, I spun the wheel and swerved the cab onto the left path. The blank-faced figures on the other roads didn't move, didn't react, just watched me go. As I drove deeper into the fog, the trees bent closer, their branches scratching against the windows like claws. The sound was a symphony of agony. My radio, which had been silent for a minute, crackled back to life. 1403 Darkwood Lane, the voice whispered. And then a new sound joined it. A soft, distant ringing. A payphone. A small, dilapidated phone booth appeared by the side of the road, its glass panels cracked, its paint peeling. The phone inside was off the hook, swinging back and forth, and from it came the sound of a ringing phone. Answer it, Jack, the voice ordered. It's for you. My heart hammered against my chest. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the freezing Brooklyn night. I knew this phone. I remembered this place. It was just a few yards from where I had found Sarah's car, empty, with the driver's side door left open. I slammed on the brakes, my body lurching forward. I wasn't going to get out. I wasn't going to do what this thing wanted. I sat there shaking as the phone continued to ring. And then, from the back seat, a new sound. A low, drawn-out sigh. The kind of weary sigh a person makes when they're tired of waiting. My blood ran cold. The passenger was back, and it was getting impatient. I knew that I was about to face not just my nightmare, but the truth of the case that broke me. And I had a feeling that this time I wouldn't just be a witness, I would be the main event. The sigh from the back seat was like a gust of wind from a crypt. I didn't dare turn around, I didn't have to. I could feel its presence. A dense, suffocating weight that pressed down on me from the passenger side, a cold that seeped through the seats and into my bones. The phone booth on the side of the road continued to ring, a shrill, insistent siren in the otherwise dead silence. "You should answer it, Jack," the voice from the radio whispered, its tone a low, chilling purr. "It's the call you've been waiting for." My body was a statue of pure fear. I remembered that night. The phone call. It was the anonymous tip that led me to Sarah's car, and to nothing else. I'd always felt there was more to it. A detail I missed, a whisper in the wind that I couldn't quite hear. And now, 10 years later, I was back here, about to hear it all over again. With trembling hands, I reached for the handle of the cab door. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal, but I couldn't open it. It was locked. All the doors were locked. I slammed my fist against the window, the glass staying solid and unbreakable. This cab was no longer a vehicle. It was a cage. From the rearview mirror, a flash of movement. It wasn't my reflection this time. It was the passenger, a dark, indistinct blob that now seemed to be swirling, coalescing into something. I could almost make out a face, a gaunt, hollow-eyed face. And as I stared at it, I saw what it was. It was a collection of faces, all shifting and merging into one. The blank-faced figures from the road outside, all of them somehow contained within this one dark shape. "They have something to say," the radio rasped. "All of them, the lost ones, the victims of Darkwood Lane." I closed my eyes, trying to block it all out. It had to be a dream, a hallucination. But when I opened them, the cab was still moving, now approaching a derelict, crumbling house at the end of the lane. 1403 Darkwood Lane. The house where Sarah disappeared. The place that broke me. The cab came to a halt on its own. The engine died. The silence was back, heavier than ever. My hands instinctively went to the car's clock, but it was frozen. 3:07. It was always 3:07. The passenger seat was now empty. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw nothing. My reflection was normal, but my skin was crawling. I could feel the presence of the midnight passenger all around me, in every creak of the car, every gust of cold wind. I finally turned my head, my heart a hammer against my ribs. The back seat was empty. No. Wait, it wasn't empty. There was something there, a faint shadow on the back of the seat. I leaned closer, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The shadow began to deepen, to take on substance, and slowly, horrifyingly, it became a person. The features were hazy at first, then sharper. It was a man, his face gaunt, his eyes filled with a terror that mirrored my own. I stared at the figure. A cold, dizzying dread washed over me as the recognition hit me like a physical blow. The man in the back seat was me, a younger me. The Jack from 10 years ago, the cop who failed to save Sarah. The radio hissed one last time. "You never found the passenger, Jack, because you were the passenger all along." And then, everything went black. I jolted awake, my body drenched in sweat. The cab was parked on the side of a quiet Brooklyn street. The engine was off. The digital clock on the dash read 3:08 a.m. The nightmare was over. I was back. The relief was a wave so powerful it made me want to cry. I was safe. I was alive. I took a deep, shuddering breath. My eyes finally clear. I glanced in the rearview mirror, just to be sure. Just one last look. And that's when I saw it. The back seat was empty, but in the mirror, in the reflection of the car behind me, a dark shape was slowly rising from the back seat, its head turning, looking directly at me. And slowly, so slowly, it began to raise its head. A face formed in the shadows, and it was mine, a hollow-eyed, terrified version of me. My heart stopped. I was still in the nightmare. The loop hadn't broken. I wasn't the driver. I was the passenger. and the driver of this unseen journey was finally revealing himself. And he was me. The camera was my shield. For 9 years, it had been the only thing standing between me and the silent, desolate landscape of Night Valley, Arizona. The desert here doesn't just hold sand and sagebrush. It holds a stillness that burrows deep into your soul, a quiet that whispers of forgotten things. My name is Liam Carter, and I am a photographer. I came here for the light, for the brutal, unforgiving beauty of the desert at dawn and dusk. But lately, the darkness has been my only subject. It started a few nights ago. Always the same dream. I'm standing in the middle of the desert, the moon a bruised pearl in the black sky, my camera hanging heavy from my neck. And there, 100 yards away, stands an old, ornate mirror. It's taller than a man, framed in dark, twisted wood that looks like petrified roots. I can't move. I can only stare at my reflection. But it's not my face staring back. It's always a different one. A face I don't know. The first night it was a young woman, her eyes wide with fear. The second, an old man with a skeletal grin. Each night the face is different, and each night it moves closer. It never makes a sound, but I can see its lips moving, forming a single word. I can't hear it, but I know what it's saying. My name. Liam. The dream always ends the same way. The face is so close now I can see the dust in its pores, the terror in its eyes. It reaches a hand out to the glass, and just as its fingers press against the surface, I wake up, gasping for air. But the horror doesn't end there. The moment I open my eyes, I feel a shift in the air, a drop in the temperature of my small, dusty apartment. My heart hammers in my chest as my gaze falls on the corner of the room. It's always there. A faint, watery stain on the plaster, barely visible in the moonlight seeping through my window. It's the exact shape of that mirror. A ghost of a reflection, a portal leaking into my world. Last night was the worst yet. The face in the mirror was so close, its nose touching the glass. I could feel its hot, desperate breath on the other side. When I woke up, the stain on the wall was clearer, and on the floor beneath it, a tiny, desiccated bird feather. I don't own any birds. I don't even have a cat. The desert is miles away. But the feather was real. A piece of the nightmare had followed me home. Today, my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold my camera. I'm a photographer, not a ghost hunter. But the lines are blurring. I drove into town, seeking some kind of normalcy, some human contact. I saw Deputy Harold sitting in his patrol car outside the dusty diner, a cup of coffee in his hand. He's been looking tired lately, a grim, haunted look in his eyes. More people are going missing. Hikers, wanderers, even a few locals. The desert here swallows them up without a trace. I have a sick, creeping feeling that my dreams are somehow connected to it. I pull out my camera, a battered, trustworthy Canon, and start walking toward the edge of town, toward the vast, silent expanse of the desert. I need to face this. I need to find that mirror. It sounds crazy, I know. But if it's real, if it's the source of this fear, then I need to get proof. I need a picture. I need to know the truth. As I walk, the ground crunching under my boots, a sudden gust of cold wind hits me, a strange breeze in the suffocating August heat. It carries a fine dust, and with it the faint scent of something old, something dead. I stop and look at my camera's lens. Tiny specks of desert dust have settled on the glass. The same dust I saw in the pores of the face in my dream last night. And then I hear it. A faint tap. A quick, sharp T-tap. It's coming from inside my camera. My blood runs cold. I slowly raise the camera to my eye, my finger hovering over the shutter button. I snap a photo of the empty desert ahead of me, the flash illuminating the darkness for a brief, blinding moment. When I look at the small screen on the back of the camera, my stomach lurches. The picture shows a single, dried-up leaf resting on a rock. A leaf I know for a fact wasn't there when I took the picture. The same type of leaf that was in the dream. I spin around, my heart pounding, looking behind me. Nothing. I'm alone in the desert, surrounded by the eerie silence. But then I hear it again. The tapping. Not from my camera this time. It's coming from my left, from the side of my head. A single, distinct T-tap against glass. I stop and slowly turn, my eyes wide with terror. There is nothing there. Only the cold, desert air. I'm standing in the open, with nothing around me. But the sound came from right beside me. I hold my breath, listening. And then, from the blackness ahead, a new sound. A whisper. A cold, dry whisper that brushes against my ear, so close it feels like a hand. Liam. My name. The word I knew the faces in the mirror were saying. The terror is so overwhelming I can't move. I'm a moth to the flame. I have to find it. I have to see it. I take a step forward, then another into the darkness. I'm walking toward the mirror, toward the dream. And I know with a sickening certainty that this time, I won't just be looking at a reflection. I kept walking, guided by the phantom whisper of my name. The camera felt heavy in my hand, no longer a shield but a burden. The sound of my boots on the gravel was the only thing I could hear, a frantic rhythm against the desert's oppressive silence. The moon was high now, casting long, eerie shadows that writhed and twisted as I moved. Every shadow seemed to hold the shape of a man, of a killer, a reflection of the legend Deputy Harold had told me about, the serial killer who lost his eyes to the mirror. And then I saw it. It wasn't a trick of the moonlight. It was real. Standing in the middle of a clearing, its dark, twisted frame like an ancient sentry against the night sky. The ornate, full-length mirror from my dreams. A shiver of cold dread raced up my spine, a feeling far colder than the desert air. I stopped, my heart a drum in my ears. The mirror's surface was not reflecting the desert behind it. It wasn't reflecting anything. It was a black void, a perfect, absolute darkness that seemed to swallow the moonlight. My hand, without my permission, raised the camera to my eye. I had to get a picture. Proof. But before I could snap the shot, a sound broke the silence. The faintest, most unsettling sound in the world. A gentle tapping. I looked at the mirror. A finger was tapping on the inside of the glass. The black void shifted, and a face began to form. A face I had seen in my dreams. A young woman, her eyes wide with terror, her lips moving silently. She wasn't just a reflection, she was inside. My mind reeled. This wasn't a dream. This was real, and the faces were trapped inside, calling for help. The tapping grew more urgent. Her face was pressing against the surface, her mouth forming a word. But this time it wasn't my name. I could read her lips. Help me. I staggered backward, my foot catching on a piece of brittle wood. My hands went to my face, my eyes wide with a horror so profound it felt like a physical weight. As I stared, I saw more faces behind hers. A crowd of them, all distorted and desperate, their silent screams echoing in my mind. The faces of the missing people from Night Valley. The old man with the skeletal grin from my second dream was there. They were all there, and then, as my eyes scanned the crowd of spectral reflections, I saw a new face, one I didn't recognize. The face of a man with his eyes gouged out, two black, empty holes in the mirror's surface. He wasn't screaming, he was smiling. The smile of a madman, the smile of a killer. The sound of his name, a faint whisper in my head, was a chilling confirmation. Thomas. The killer from the legend. The mirror's surface began to ripple like water. The faces behind the glass melted away, replaced by the desert behind me. My heart gave a frantic leap of relief. It's over. The illusion is gone. I turned to run, my legs finally working again. But a reflection caught my eye, a glint in the darkness. My own reflection. It was on the surface of my camera's lens, a tiny, distorted image. My reflection wasn't looking at me. It was looking at the killer's face that was now standing directly behind me. I could see the killer's black, empty eyes reflected in my own terrified ones. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that was instantly swallowed by the desert. I spun around, ready to face him, to run, to do anything. But there was nothing there. Just the empty desert. I looked back at the mirror. It was still reflecting the dark desert night. My camera was in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to look at the lens. I didn't want to see what was waiting in my own reflection. A profound silence fell over the desert, more terrifying than any scream. I was no longer alone, but I wasn't with the living either. I was trapped between two worlds, and the mirror was the door. I knew I couldn't leave. My reflection, my double, was waiting, and I had a sickening feeling that I was the next one on its list. The world around me seemed to be holding its breath. The cold wind died down and the desert became a vacuum of silence. I stood motionless, my gaze fixed on the mirror's surface, now a perfect, inky black again. The faces of the missing were gone. The killer's empty eyes no longer stared back, but a new horror had taken their place, the knowledge that I was being hunted by a reflection of myself. I had to get away. My legs, which had been frozen by terror, finally found their purpose. I turned and ran, not back toward the town, but deeper into the darkness of the desert. I stumbled over rocks and bushes, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it gaining on me. A cold presence that wasn't just following me, it was within me. I ran for what felt like an eternity, until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I collapsed behind a large boulder, gasping for breath, my camera still clutched in my hand. I had to think, what did this thing want? Why was it haunting me? And then a thought struck me with the force of a punch. The camera. The mirror's reflections were entering my world through the camera's lens. It wasn't just a device, it was a conduit. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. I had to destroy it. I had to break the connection. I raised the camera over my head, ready to smash it against the rock, but then I hesitated. No, this was my only chance. My only weapon against the mirror was the one thing it was using to get to me. I had to fight fire with fire. I spun around, pointing the camera at the mirror's location. I knew it was still there, a silent sentinel in the dark. I raised the camera, my finger on the flash button. This was it. One shot. One chance. I had no idea what it would do, but I knew I had to try. I aimed the lens, not at the mirror's surface, but at the dark, twisting frame around it, at the source of all this horror. With a trembling hand, I pressed the button. A blinding flash of light exploded from the camera's lens, an intense, brilliant white that lit up the entire desert. I squeezed my eyes shut against the glare. The light wasn't just a flash. It was a wave of pure energy that slammed into the mirror. I heard a sound, not of glass breaking, but of a deep, resonant thrum, like a tuning fork vibrating at the frequency of madness. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was gone. In its place, a swirling vortex of smoke and dust was dissipating into the night. My camera was still in my hand, but it was dead. The screen was black, the lens cracked. I had done it. I had destroyed the mirror. I had freed the souls trapped within. I was safe. A profound sense of relief washed over me. I turned and stumbled back toward the town, the nightmare finally over. I felt a strange lightness in my step, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The moon seemed brighter, the air cleaner. I had survived. I was back on the main road, the streetlights of Night Valley in the distance. I held the camera up to my face, looking at the broken lens. The last picture I took had been a blur of light and smoke, the destruction of the mirror. I smiled, a small, weary triumph. I was free. But then I saw it. A tiny crack in the corner of the camera's lens, too small to notice at first. My smile faded. I leaned closer, my heart sinking. And there, inside the hairline fracture of the glass, a tiny, distorted image stared back at me. A face. A familiar face. It was the face of the young woman from my first dream, her eyes wide with terror, her lips silently mouthing a single word: help. And behind her, just a shadow within the crack, was another face. A face I had seen in my dreams, but one I hadn't seen in the mirror. It was me. A new reflection. A new prisoner, waiting for my turn to take their place. The mirror was gone, but its soul had transferred to my camera. The loop wasn't broken. It had just found a new home. And the next time I used my camera, I knew my face would be the one trapped inside, silently begging for help from a world that couldn't hear me.